Welcome back, movie lovers. Thank you for coming to another installment of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster. With me, as usual, is my co-host and cinephile and fellow cinephile, Amy Blackfire. And joining us today is the other Knight of Keira, Jared. Welcome, Jared.
Hi, nice to be here. I'm not just the other night. We're ever growing, you know. We've
Yeah,
got a few more adherents since the last time we talked. But I'm happy to be your loyal third in command here.
yeah. And today we're going to be talking about the 2018 film Colette, which was one of the films that we actually covered um, during our focus on Keira Knightley stream, but we're going to expand on it today.
Hmm.
So I'm very happy to do that with you guys. Uh, First of all, I guess I'll just start with, I guess, general impressions. How did you guys first see this movie, and what did you think of it?
Go ahead and go first, Jared, since you're our guest.
All right. So Colette was what you could call a hidden gem, and I call it that because it was hard to find. Obviously, Keira Knightley, a period piece. These are both things that I really, really love. So when I heard about this movie, I made a point. I want to go see this, and then I couldn't because it wasn't playing in a theater near me. Or rather, I would have to drive like 50 miles, and unfortunately, that just wasn't feasible at that time, much as I would have loved to do so. So I didn't catch up on it until a little bit early, like maybe a few months later. I think this movie came out in September of 2018. I caught up
Hmm.
in early 2019, and when I saw it, I loved it. It was a great. It was another great installment in one of Kira's specialties of these period dramas, but this is a rather unique one. So I feel like it's definitely worth having its own stream to discuss it because as well there are certain people may label Kira as the period queen. Like it's not really that simple. Like this is a very complex story, and it's a very modern story in its own way too.
Yeah, I want to stop for a moment because I did misspeak, and I need to take this opportunity to apologize because Kate, you are not chopped liver, as Jared rightfully points out. Our ranks have been growing, so you are absolutely the fourth member of the Knights of Keira. We just need to talk you into coming on for one of the streams.
It's a round table, not it's not there's no
It's
hierarchy.
not a triangle table, triangular shaped table.
But yeah, so Amy, you want to talk about your experience discovering Colette?
Yeah, so I ran across the trailer a couple of times and obviously was interested in it because it was about a female author and her struggles with, having getting credit for her own work. And, I obviously am very interested in that. And it's also turn of the 20th century, which did I do that right? Turn of the 20th century. Early
Yeah.
1900s, which is what I study in China. So that's like my sweet spot period. Like, from like 1895 to 1915 is one of my favorite periods to study. So I was excited by that. And I did not see it until last year, 2019, and I didn't even realize there were queer themes. And so I was like, this has everything. This movie has everything, right? So it was very downplayed. I didn't hear anything about it other than seeing one trailer and thinking, wow, she looks cute in the short haircut. That was all I had to work on, and now it is my second favorite Keira Knightley film. Like when I saw it, I wasn't even halfway through it, and I was like, "This is number two now," because The Duchess is my favorite. John and I did a stream on that a couple of months back, but now it bumped up to my second favorite, and I wasn't even done with the film, and I was like, "This is amazing." And the scenes are iconic, the lines are iconic, and I think the characters really jump off the screen.
Yeah, what did it's funny because it was shortly after you and I had discovered that we had the shared love of Kira, and I was like, "Have you seen Colette?" And you had, and I'm like, "Amy, you have to see Colette. You're gonna love this movie." Yeah,
Right? Yeah, like John and a lot of people in the chat and those that follow me on Twitter and everything know my big thing is feminist analysis. And so John, like was so surprised that I hadn't seen this movie because it's so ripe for these kinds of issues that I like to talk about. And on top of that, as a bisexual woman, I absolutely appreciate the trans and queer issues that it talks about. It's really an amazing film, and I think that the score, I'm sure John is going to talk about. There's like so many elements of it that I think are worth praising, and I think the only bad thing about it is that hardly anyone knows about it. That's the only bad thing about Colette, is that it's so lesser known. Everyone, we love Pride and Prejudice. These two wonderful men right here did a whole stream on that a while back. Like I said, I did a stream on the Duchess, and I love her. We're going to, I think in January, be talking about Dangerous Method, correct, John?
Yep.
Which I haven't seen yet. But yeah, there are some really iconic, well-known Keira Knightley movies, and this is not one of them, and I think that's the only thing that's wrong with Colette, is that people don't know about it.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on a whole rant about how this movie was ignored throughout 2018. It wasn't even campaigned for any Oscars. The studio went in favor of some of their other fare that year, which is not terribly surprising because you look at the film and the studio probably thought there were more palatable films palatable in their eyes to push for awards. But the fact, like, even if the Academy hadn't gone for the movie in a big way, you could easily see this movie being nominated for costume design, original score, art direction. It's just such a shame that so few people know about this film, and this is exactly why the Oscars exist, which is to prop up films that people might not otherwise be exposed to, like Colette. So yeah, I'm I'm quite a bit bitter about that, but.
Well, and something we talk about a lot, John, is Oscar-worthy clips, and that the Duchess, we have that in there. We have it in Pride and Prejudice, where she finally kind of blows up at Mr. Darcy, where she just sticks it to the man and does this amazing speech. And Colette has that when she says, give me the credit for my writing. And she tells him, I've done everything, and, we'll talk about that because that's my favorite scene. But there are Oscar-worthy clips all over this movie, and so for it to be just kind of brushed aside is really a crime, and they should be arrested for it.
Yeah, Guilty Undertaker makes a good point. Taking credit for other people's work hit too close to home. Yeah, definitely. But that said, we're talking about it, and I'm very proud, that we get to come together and talk about this great movie and hopefully inspire some other people to give it a chance, even if they do hear all about the movie from us, because as always, we'll be talking about it in detail. But I will say that when it's funny that, we talk about nobody having heard of this, because me being the, raging crazy Keira Knightley fan that I am, I absolutely knew this was in the pipeline as it was being made. And it was kind of a dry spell for Keira fans because she had just recently given birth and she went a couple of years, having some bit parts here and there, but she hadn't taken on like a major leading role. And so I was quite excited about this movie coming out, but it premiered at the film festivals like early in 2018, and it didn't come out until like October. So basically, I was waiting the whole year for this movie to come out. So I was quite excited. And then, as you say, it didn't make many like mainstream waves, but which is unfortunate, not only because it's a great movie, but because I think it was a very timely movie upon its release. It's kind of strange to think about how the movie went into production before the Me Too movement happened, and then it seemed to come out just right as all that was exploding. And I can't think of a movie that speaks more to that. I mean, sometimes these happy accidents happen where a film is just right for the time that it's made in, and I feel like this was that film.
Yeah, no, I mean, movies tend to find their audience and their place and their time, even if it rarely is the time when they are released, and that kind of is true of Colette as well. She didn't get her due credit until years after the fact. She was fortunate enough that she was able to receive it in her lifetime, which is something many artists unfortunately don't have the opportunity to do. But the themes that she struggles with, they are in a way much more modern, as I said, than we typically expect from a movie that takes place in the early 1900s, and it's because Colette was a groundbreaking individual, and she is she refused to be constrained, and this movie really kind of honors that spirit. So even though it's not doesn't necessarily have the attention that it deserved on its release, I have hope it'll find it with time. This is the kind of movie that people discover, and when they discover it, it means more that they found it at a time of their life that it mattered most to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Jared, and I like to think that it'll just take some time, but through word of mouth, people will discover this film and fall in love with it. I feel like it's already gained some ground in the 2 years since it came out, because I often it's funny because what started off as a joke with our Knights of Keira accounts is kind of taken off, because we have one of those on Tumblr, and what's the reason why I mention that is because over on Tumblr you can't really escape, when you run a search on Keira Knightley, people talking about discovering Colette, and they're like, how have I not known that this movie exists? So I do think that's happening a lot with fans, and so hopefully that'll continue. But yeah, I guess we'll just dive into the movie. It's just I can't not just start off by talking about the performances a little. Can we just sort of bask in how utterly phenomenal Keira is throughout this film for a minute, because she does have quite a transformation from beginning to end.
Yeah, and you can even look at the hairstyles and the way that she acts at parties changing, right? So when she says, "Oh, I like my long hair" and all of that, and then he mentions it, her husband Willy at some point, they have someone try out for Claudine, who is the character that Colette wrote, and she has short hair, and Colette kind of goes, "I pictured her with long hair," but then all of a sudden, Willy says, "Oh, I think she looks good with short hair," so Colette cuts off her hair, and in my opinion, of course, pulls it off better. But you have this transformation of the hair. You also have the way that she is at parties. In the very beginning, she's timid. She's from the countryside, and Willy kind of uses that against her a lot, because he is a rich man, and he actually gave up his inheritance to marry her because his family didn't approve, is kind of the what's hinted at, and he, just like a man, keeps that in his back pocket until she kind of, makes him mad or is rebelling, and then pulls it out. "I gave up my inheritance for you." Oh yeah, it was when she caught him cheating with sex workers. Fine. So you have. But he
makes the distinction, though. He's very clear. She's not a disreputable woman. It's fine.
Well, and I think that sex work should be legal, and it's not at all disreputable. And so it's also to be like, dude, so not only are you judging Colette for calling you on your bullcrap, but then you're also tearing up sex workers. Yeah. Like, get over yourself. Anyway, we'll definitely get to that scene, trust me. But this idea of transformation and Colette's transformation, another transformation you can see in the scene, or in the movie, is when she has 3 names, and she marks out the first 2 names, and she underlines Colette twice. That's another transformation, right? She's owning her author name and her authorial voice. So we have these many examples where she starts to own her own herself. She also starts to own her sexuality, right? Like, they come back from a party and he goes, "That man was flirting with you," and she goes, "Oh, come on, he was newly married Anyway, I found the wife more interesting. And he's kind of like, and he's like strangely turned on by it. Not strangely, I mean, I kind of get why. But you have her also owning her sexuality, owning her authorial voice, and owning her fashion sense, right? All of these kind of come together to create Colette.
Yeah, we start to really see there's a cut in the film where after they have their first big argument, after he cheats on her, and she goes back home, and he talks her into returning, but she makes it very clear that she doesn't want to be lied to anymore. I mean, she's accepted that he is who he is, apparently. So the key thing for her is that he's not going to lie about it, and she wants to be part of everything. So that's her sort of using that to take control. And then the scene cuts to a couple years down the road, and we see a definite change in her fashion sense, where she's kind of taken that step to sort of change her image, and then the name is another forward step in that. She's developing this this personality amongst the so-called elite, and so it's these steps along the way of her evolving.
And if I could actually quote directly from that scene, get your drinks ready at home, because we're about to drink to some patriarchy. When she catches him cheating, he goes, "Oh," and this is her husband speaking, "we are the weaker sex, slaves to our own urges." Oh, well, all is forgiven then, Mr. Man. Ugh.
Yeah, no, he's a piece of work. He is quite the character, but that's honestly that's part of what makes the movie so effective, is that he is such a despicable foil for her in so many ways. And we kind of were talking back to the performance for Keira. So I would probably call this my second favorite Keira Knightley performance. Elizabeth Bennet will always be first. It will never be displaced. It's just the truth. But this one is one of her most complex, and I would kind of in my own way describe it not so much as her character evolving as her character unveiling, because I feel like she comes across when you first meet her as pretty timid, but if you go and listen to the stories that she ends up telling, her school stories, it's clear that she was never timid. She was just, kind of sheltered in a way, and she was also hadn't seen enough of the world. But she always had this vibrant spark in her, clearly. And as she becomes more comfortable, showing that side of herself. And you can kind of see it. She slowly becomes more and more and more, not only independent, not only feistier in her willingness to push back against Willy's kind of wanton behavior, but she also becomes much more secure. And I kind of feel like she always had that foundation. It wasn't so much that these events changed her, as she refused to, be concealed anymore. And I kind of feel like that's a theme that runs throughout the movie, because at the very end, I'm sure we'll get to that wonderful scene that we all love, that performance where she finally blows up at Willy for what he does with her stories. But she doesn't. What the phrase she chooses to use is, "I've outgrown her," and I kind of interpret that in a way as not necessarily that I've become a different person, but that I don't need to hide anymore.
Yeah, that's very well said, Jared. And it's funny as I think of this, I think we can all sort of empathize with that, especially sort of in our community of just sort of peeling back the layers of ourselves and growing more comfortable with who we are inside. So, but God, now all I want to do is talk about that final scene, but we'll get there.
We'll get there.
And can I also just say, John, another important theme I think in this movie is authorship and readership, specifically male authorship, male readership, and female readership. And I obviously recognize that non-binary individuals and trans individuals exist and have existed for all time. However, at this time they were very binary, similar to our own, even though we say that we've gotten better. So they're so surprised when they find out the main readers of these Claudine novels are young women, right? And whenever Willy is telling her, oh, add this scene, take out this scene, and she's like, I don't, what about this, what about that? And he goes, hey, I know what men want to read, assuming that men are going to read this, right? This is very similar to what John and I talked about with another John, Bronsteries, about Little Women. A lot of talk about, of readership and authorship, and this kind of assumption that the markets at the time, and still kind of today, make about their readers and authors as well. In the older, even now, it's hard for female authors to make it on the market. So, for example, the writer of The Outsiders, which I read in high school and is assigned in many high school classes, for many years they thought it was a man because she used her initials. And then later came out, hey, I'm a woman. They're like, well, darn, we already like this novel and we've given it so much money and promotion, we can't take it back now. So, and even when I write, I'm working on a fantasy novel, I use my initials just because I hope someone will pick it up and enjoy it for itself and not go, oh, this is a female created piece, right? So, but we have, Colette really taking on her role as an author and realizing that she's the one that put the work into it, and people are liking it, but they're also liking it because they assume that a man wrote it, And so she realizes that, hey, it's been tried and tested, and people like it. Now I can put my name on it, right? And then she has to, of course, fight for, and we get kind of at the end of the movie title showing that she did win the fight to have her name on the, her credit for the novels, but you can also make the argument that if she had put her name on it from the beginning, it may not have gotten as popular because the market at the time was so male author centric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely difficult to know, and it's sort of that's sort of the frustrating thing is that it's not like you can point to this and say Willy was of no help at all, because he very much sort of gave, I mean, as much as it's kind of horrible to listen to him talk about what men actually want to read, he does give her tips on writing and sort of editorial advice, and also he was a hell of a promoter. He knew how to get those stories out there, and you see all of the marketing genius that he came up with the different products and turning, deciding to take Colette to the stage and all of that stuff. So, but then you see him reveling in the success. I remarked upon this as I was watching the film again today, when he's being sort of hoisted up, after the success of the book, and he looked so utterly happy. He beams with the pride of someone who created something that's successful, and it's like, dude, you are not responsible for this. Have a little bit of humility in the face of this thing that you took credit for but didn't actually do. So yeah, but that's kind of what's great about Willy is, like, he undoubtedly contributed some, something to Colette and sort of, helped her in certain areas, and the way he's played is so charming, so that at times we really enjoy watching him, but he is such a despicable human being in what he does. So, but again, I say that's the brilliance of the character of Willy and the way that Dominic West portrays him.
Yeah, and I would say that another thing that Colette ultimately says to Willy towards the end of the movie is that essentially their marriage has been a business arrangement. And one thing you can kind of see throughout the movie is that when they're actually conducting their marriage more as a business than they are as an actual marriage, they tend to get along better. They tend to be a bit happier. And it's because they are, in a sense, creative partners in this. Obviously, Colette is the driving force with her work, but Willy is what he is ultimately at his core is a showman, an entertainer. He wants to be the great man with all capital letters there. And that's why he gets them into such financial trouble, because he always insists on picking up the check and being larger than life. But Colette does learn from that in a way, because she sees him just be unapologetic in every way. And when he's dancing on the table, like proclaiming the greatness of Claudine, he's not like, I mean, deep down he knows he doesn't deserve any credit for it, but part of him really does believe it. He's not just putting on a show there. He actually thinks, as he says, this is a collaboration. And the reason he can believe that is because he does, at the very beginning, kind of provide her with some edits and some notes and some guidance, and he lends the name that ultimately gets the door open. But the thing about it is, this being a business arrangement, as she ultimately says at the end of the movie, I paid you back 1,000 times over. And he just doesn't accept that. He wants to continue to take and take and take, and he doesn't recognize that he's run out of things to give her.
I would say his controlling of the purse strings kind of cancels out any edits that he gives, honestly. Like, I don't mean to completely, but at the same time, when that scene that Jared was talking about, when he said, oh, this was collaborative, he goes, look, there was my edit, and then he flips, and it's like, totally her. Look, there's my edit. It's like, really? Is it really? Like, I think of collaborative, like, I'm currently writing a collaborative essay with Lo the Links, plug, and it's 50-50. We comment on each other's writing. We synthesize our writing together. It's not at all what he, had shown. He's an editor. That's not the same thing as a co-author, I would argue. And the way that he gets them in so much financial trouble, that's her money, technically, that he's spending. And when he does things like, sell the rights to Claudine herself as a character, and then go, oh, well, it's because I didn't want to buy that summer home that I bought you. Well, maybe ask her which one she wants more. I bet you she would have answered she'd rather have the rights to Claudine, because that is her legacy. And she even tells him that's our child. And in the movie, they don't have children together. I'm not sure if that's the case in real life. But that's certainly the case in the movie. So to then sell that away was wrong. And he just makes these decisions without consulting her, which at the time, men could absolutely do. And also, I just want to say, on top of that, we have his fetishization of Claudine, his hypersexualization of her. He literally has, as he's cheating on his wife, women dress up like Claudine and read lines from the novel for sexy time. What the heck? Willy, I want to say more words that are worse, but I want us to get monetized. But you know what I'm saying? Like, what the heck are we doing here? He wants to get with Claudine more than he wants to make her a symbol for young women to be inspired by. And that's what I think, where he taints the work. He taints the art. And that's what makes him not a co-author, more than anything else.
No, I would agree he's not a co-author in any sense. He was more a business partner, as I said, and one who had kind of a false idea about what exactly that meant. Because the thing about he really is a deeply pathetic character at the end of the day, but there is kind of a hint of tragedy to him as well, which is why I kind of have a little bit of empathy for him, even as I watch him just absolutely deserve everything that's coming to him. But the thing about him is that he really just, like, him having the fetish for Claudine is because he can project. He is projecting his idealized version of this woman onto this fictional character, which is something he can do because through the edits that Colette makes, Claudine is fictional, but it's because he can't do that to Colette, because she is too real, she is too vibrant, she is too, too strong for him, essentially. And so that's why he tries to, one, either force her into that box, sometimes literally, and locking her in her room, or he tries to find substitutes in the form of an actress or these gullible young women who are so infatuated with the Claudine character that they're willing to play his game, like Meg. And so he really just isn't willing to own up to the truth, because if he were to do that, he would have to admit that he is not this great man. Perhaps once he did have a spark of talent, but he squandered it, just like he squandered the money, just like he squandered his writing skills, whatever he had, and just like he squandered Colette, because she, essentially, he didn't get to. He wasted her, but she would not be wasted. So that's when she eventually breaks away from him. It is a moment of triumph, because he is just he had lost his grip long ago, and he's only now realizing it.
Yeah, he has such a denial about it, even onto that last scene where he thinks he is going to be able to apologize his way out of this, where he's like, I was stupid, I made a mistake, please forgive me. And he doesn't even understand, that's not going to work anymore. You had already lost her. This is just, this was just the knife in the back that you are now just, what was going to happen gradually is just happening full stop now.
And I think, on top of his fetishization of Claudine and his hypersexualization of a schoolgirl, let's all remember, she's supposed to be young. I think also you see that with what happens when he has, the woman playing Claudine and then Colette on his lap. You also have where Colette has an affair with the woman that is allegedly from Louisiana, but just one gripe, that is the worst Louisianan accent I've ever seen. Just hire an American actor. I understand that it's all like an all British cast, but come on, it was excruciating. It turned Irish halfway through, and I was like, what is happening? Anyway,
it's because I believe the actress is in fact Irish. So
yeah, she needed I don't know if it was that she needed a better language coach, or that she just doesn't have the kind of ear for accents like that, but it was awful. Anyways, that's not the point. He also has, while Colette was having an affair with the Louisianan, who I am blanking on the name, I want to say it's Georgie.
Yeah.
While she was doing that, he was then also having an affair with Georgie. This is kind of, in feminist analysis, I can't think of the exact way we would put it, but it's basically a substitute for a three-way. Basically, he wants to be with both of them in bed, but he can't, so he'll settle for this, getting with her right after he knew she got with Colette, and then having the two women that both look like Claudine on his lap. This kind of it's very obvious that the reason he's into her being into women is because he's hoping for a three-way, which is, quite classic. But he has this sexualization of women that are so talented, right? The woman who played Claudine was talented, and then Colette is talented. And he doesn't see beyond their place as a sexual object.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really think that his it's very immature the way he approaches all this, and I don't know if necessarily he is aware of how pathetic it is, or if he is just trying to, or if he actually thinks he's being this conquering, man of the town. But he really doesn't come across as very vibrant when he's trying to seduce these women. He comes across as as he says, the weaker sex, like give me, please, like be with me, that kind of stuff. And it's really just him trying to fill a need that he probably shouldn't be indulging, but then again, he probably shouldn't be doing a lot of the things he's doing, and it's just because he's so fundamentally broken. Whatever it is that broke him probably happened long before this movie, because I don't necessarily think we see him change much over the course of the movie. I think we see him kind of in the sense like how I described Colette unveiling. Willy kind of spends the movie wilting until at the end he is just little more than a puddle of whatever once was a bright and vibrant flower, if it ever was, what has now rotted, whereas Colette has blossomed.
Yeah, and I just wanted to go back. We were talking about the dynamic between Colette and Willy and Georgie. I do have to say that is probably one of the most hilarious. I guess you just call it menage a trois, sort of back and forth scenes with the way the music plays into it, and just the way Willy keeps saying "off to the bank," and
and sometimes it's like dark outside, and it's like the banks aren't gonna be open. like Colette knows you're. Come on, she's not stupid. And he'd literally be like running like an excited dog, be like off to the bank. It's like you're going to get late. It's very obvious. Come on, dude.
And then the way she bursts in, and then the smoke is still in the air, and she writes that in the book, which is a great way to cap off that moment, because I love the fact that she takes her revenge in the form of her novels. So there's a similar moment when he locks her in the room and insists that she write, otherwise she's not going to get out. And yes, she does go ahead and decides to write, but you can see by the look on her face, she's going to get her revenge on him through her writing.
Yes, and you have through that scene they're talking about their relationship by proxy of talking about the characters. Yep. Like he goes, oh, but blah blah blah, and she goes, it's about the dishonesty. It's not about the, about the cheating, right? So you have once again her reiterating, look, it's at this time period, women know that this is going to happen, right? That the man is not going to be faithful, but she just doesn't want off to the bank. She wants, hey, I'm going to go sleep with that Louisiana woman you're sleeping with. It doesn't have to be that clear about it. She just doesn't want to be lied to because it infantilizes her. It makes her feel like he thinks she's stupid. And she is anything but. And so it's insulting to be like that, to think that he can just say off to the bank. And, it's this unsaid thing. We'll just go ahead and say it, is basically what she's saying.
It's a breach of contract. She essentially said, I want to be part of everything. And then again, if you look at their relationship more as a business arrangement, then he is violating the terms of the deal that he agreed to. And she holds the power even then. In that scene, there's a little moment I love where they've just actually pulled one over on the couple, and now she's writing about it, and she's like, I'm thinking of killing him off in the next one. And he's like, please don't. But, and then, of course, she pushes back on the idea that she could ever have an affair with a man. But because that's how he thinks that he can still control her as his wife, even if he can't control the literary output. But they do actually, but in that scene, they go back to, in a sense, being business partners. And I actually do feel like they have that moment of triumph in a way where the Georgie's husband goes and tries to buy up all the books because he's so embarrassed about what his wife has done, but Willy actually owns the copyrights, so they just go to the next publisher, collect a second advance, and roll out the books anyway. And that actually is kind of you when you see them together in the next scene, they're happy because they pulled off a heist basically.
Yeah.
And then that's where their dynamic actually is the best, it's only when they are actually kind of trying to be intimate with each other in any way that it really starts to fall apart.
And what's interesting about the dynamic is I think she recognizes that, but he doesn't. I think that he's still that guy who's professing, as hypocritical as he is, he's professing his love for her, talking about how, like in the first scene where, they're intimate in the barn, and he says, "I adore you." And he's that guy who thinks, he's given up, his inheritance, as we say again, for her. And he still thinks of it in spite of all the despicable things that he does, because of course he's not self-aware at all. That it's a romantic relationship, and that's the core of it, where I think after that first time of catching him and cheating, I think she shifts completely. I think she still has some affection for him, but it's not what it was. She loses that aspect of their relationship, and it becomes, as time goes on, more and more of a business transaction. And I think that's the imbalance between the two of them.
And I think the scenes where she's locked in and, he says she can't come out until she's produced, so many pages. I think that is a great example of the controlling of female bodies in a certain space, right? This idea that you, as the husband, can sequester your wife to a certain part of the house and literally lock her in to do what you desire, what's to your benefit, right? I think that that's a really good example of his control physically, but we also then, on top of that control of her movements, have the control of her creative works, right? And then on top of that, even though at first he seems to be kind of turned on a little by her sexuality and everything, he's still trying to also control her sexuality, and basically tells her that she can sleep with any woman, but no men. So he's like putting laws on her sexuality, right? So he's kind of has these many layers of control. And when she's talking to who later becomes her lover, Missy, who is a trans man, Missy, he says a really great line, which is that, yes, you do have a long leash with Willy, but it is a leash nonetheless. And I think that's a really good argument to make, which is no matter how much leeway the patriarchy gives you, you are still going to be under control. And you're not supposed to sit back and go, well, at least my husband doesn't beat me, right? At least he, does this or that. In the end, you are still controlled. And because of that, it is a tragedy, and it is patriarchal control. And what I really like about Missy's character is that he represents, he presents as a man, but he has this understanding of what women go through, and he is very kind and gentle, and he recognizes Colette's own, talent, and says, of course I know it's you and it's not Willy writing. Like, he's the first person to say directly to her face, yeah, half the town knows and the other half suspects. And I just love that scene.
Yeah.
Which, of course, Willy is in complete denial of it, because she later says, I think everybody knows, or at least they suspect. And he's like, nobody suspects unless you've been blabbing, to Missy. And, but yeah, it's sort of the levels of self-denial of that man.
I mean, come on, it's about a mouthy girl from the countryside, from the French countryside. What would Willy, like, she says, oh yeah, it's somewhat, based on my experiences, like she's told all of these stories to Willy. Like, no, they're coming from her directly. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out.
Yeah. And of course, you alluded to this earlier, but when Allendorf, the publisher, says, we've never had one fly off the shelves like this one, he says, and you know who's buying it? Young women. And he's like, really? That's interesting. And then he just brushes it off. It's like that's kind of a big thing right there. All of your advice.
Yeah, exactly. All of your advice about men. And you have a similar realization, once again, gonna plug Little Women, the 2019 movie. Amazing. You have that same where the editor was like, oh, it's, you know, it's too feminine or this and that, and then Little Women flies off the shelves, you know. So it shows that women's stories sell. It's just, if you're so focused on male readers, then you're not going to see that.
Yeah.
No, and I mean, part of the reason Willy is in such denial is he really has built a house of cards, and if he pulls out even one of them, or if he like opens the door a crack to let even the slightest gust of wind, it will collapse, because he is constantly, instead of trying to make a stronger foundation, he's just stacking new cards on top of new cards, and it really is very in keeping with his philosophy, the kind of what he gets at in this the first time he takes Colette to a party back when she really doesn't know what to expect, and she says, "Oh, I found them all like boring and pretentious," which they are. But he's like, "It's not pretension, it's exaggeration," and he like turns it into like a virtue, and he's like, they're all trying essentially like they're trying to put on a show essentially, and you can kind of see that with him, where from the first moment we meet him, he's throwing out all these like adjectives and like colorful, you know, proclamations and descriptors, things he later like turns around and says, "Oh, you shouldn't do this," because when she first hands him his manuscript, he's like, "There's no plot, there are too many adjectives," and it's like, dude, you are nothing but adjectives. And no plot, and no skeleton at all, no narrative skeleton at all.
How insufferable is he in that first scene where, like, you know, he talks about, you know, how you know, Paris is filled with artists, and, you know, and most of them are rubbish, but they, you know, but still they create an atmosphere. And then, you know, Sito, the mother, is, you know, talking about a play that they want to go see. It's like, "Oh, I wouldn't bother." And she's like, "Maybe I'll decide for myself." And he's like, "As you will." But, you know, bad theater is like bad dentistry. You're stuck in your chair, unable to move. It's like, shut up.
Yeah, he has no room for nuance. Like, there's that scene where he is meeting with his factory writers, and one of them is writing a music review, and he is going into something. It's like just sinking into a fetid swamp, and then the writer's like, "Actually, I kind of like the end." He's like, "Don't equivocate, just kill it." And unfortunately, I feel like that's kind of a trend that has survived to modern criticism. No room for nuance anymore. It's got to be the worst thing ever.
Yeah, that's not real. That's not relevant at all to some of our other many conversations, Jared. But yeah, but also what's interesting is, on the subject of his other writers, the fact that, you know, and as despicable as it is that he takes credit for others' work, that's actually a fairly modern idea of, you know, somebody lending their name and gathering, you know, sort of underlings to actually do the work and pass it off.
You mean Hero presented by Quentin Tarantino?
Well, no, actually, because
in that case, it was because it was a Chinese movie, and for an American audience, they wanted to present it.
Well,
under
that's
American
the studio wanting to lend one of their more famous directors' name to something. But there are a lot of cases, and I won't name names, but there are film composers who have a lot of people doing work under them, and if you look at the credits, it'll say additional music by, and then have like 15 names. I'm not going to say who the composer is that I'm referring to.
I think I know.
but that is a thing that happens. So, you know, in a lot of ways, Willy was kind of ahead of his time in that regard. Doesn't make it any less sort of despicable, especially, you know, when it's your own wife and you're taking complete credit for her work. But I did find that interesting nonetheless. But yeah, I do want to actually touch on, Jared, since you mentioned it, that scene where he first takes her to that, you know, party, and she's completely out of place, because that's a beautiful scene, the way the camera, and I do want to make note of that for most of this film, the camera follows Colette around. There's a few moments here and there where, it splinters off to like Willy or one or two other characters, but for the most part, the film follows her, and she kind of, as the director put it, Colette moves the camera basically. And I like the way it follows her around. You got that beautiful shots of looking at her sort of through the glass as she walks along. And, and you've got that moment where she sees the turtle and, obviously, a representation of herself. And she's like, you poor thing. You want the earth, and the grass. And then the scene ends on this most ridiculous of notes, which I'm still not even sure what it means, but it's like she's just walking around and there's this guy surrounded by other people. He's like singing like a high note or something and just pours like a drink or something into the piano. And I'm like, what the hell was that? And it just shows how sort of ridiculous and pompous this society is.
No, it's so overdone and ostentatious, to the point where it's ridiculous. And Colette will later go to many of these parties, but she even though she's more conversational with people, she never fully gives in to this kind of extravagance to the point of waste, kind of thing going on. Like, that's a perfectly good piano and a perfectly good drink. This kind of stuff is just crazy. And if you notice, the tortoise or the turtle has like jewels on its shell. Just like, this poor turtle doesn't want to be here. Why is it just like her? It's out of place and doesn't want to be here. And I also think what's important about the parties is you get the conversations in the coach going and with her and her husband, and after leaving the party in the coach, as well as when they leave the party, especially when she becomes more popular, it's always his decision. He comes up and says, we're leaving, right?
Yeah.
And as someone who has gone to a party with the narcissist that they were dating, I can tell you that's very representative. Is he's like all kind of upbeat on the way there, and then at the party he's the one that decides that you leave, and then on the way home in the car, in our case, in their case, in the coach, he tells you everything you did wrong and how you embarrassed him and how you could have done better. Like, I was having some PTSD stuff going on, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of women listening to this or watching this could kind of relate to that, where you have a man that is saying, I wanted you to act this way, and this way, and that's not her. That's not Colette. And later she becomes a lot more popular and everything. And he's kind of like, when he was later party scenes where he's dancing on the table and doing all of these rhymes about Claudine and stuff, then she kind of is toasting and smiling at him. She doesn't then after that go, you made a fool of yourself, Willy, right? Yeah. Like, he's the one who can berate her, but she can't say crap about his bullshit. Sorry. Anyway, I'm just saying.
Well, he has a pathological need to be the center of attention, aka a narcissist, and she is not. She's the reason she is on the sidelines of the first party is because she doesn't know what to expect. She's understandably trying to feel it out, and she isn't very impressed. Later, when you see her at these parties, you almost always see her like not as the center of attention, but unless Willy happens to drag her into it, but she's usually sitting at a wall, like sitting back like this. She's got her like hand up. She's got a drink in her hand. She's got one of her buddies to the side, and she's just got this smile on her face, like, I'm above this. Not in like all you people are terrible, but just like, I don't need to engage. I know what I don't need to be the center of attention. I don't need people to know right now, at any rate, that I'm the reason for all our success, because I know. And ultimately she does end up wanting people to know, and there's nothing wrong with that, but she doesn't have a pathological need like Willy does to own the stage, which kind of makes it interesting later that she chooses to go into acting, because I kind of feel like that's a way she feels that she can own the stage in a way that maybe she couldn't earlier with her books, just because of the nature of her collaboration with Willy and the unfortunate times that she lives. And she ends up really, even though she doesn't have the same talent for acting that she does for writing, she she likes it more. She flat out says
Yeah.
that she doesn't want to write anymore, and it's because with acting, even though she's playing a character, she gets to be free because this is a part of her realm that Willy is not pressing on her. He kind of views it as her hobby, but she views it as her job. She says, I like earning my own money, and she doesn't need to, but she does because it's, she is doing the work. She is getting credit for it. She's with colleagues like Vogue and her troupe of actors, and she is, and even if it's not always being as well received as writing would be, it's hers, and she's content with that until Willy makes the unforgivable sin of giving away what was hers to a point where she can never get it back, or so she thinks. She eventually, does claim authorship, but
Yeah, I think.
And with and with the acting too, you physically see her doing it. You can't go, that's not Colette's work. She's right there doing it. And I will also say one more interesting thing is that when she goes to Willy about putting her name on it, she says both our names.
Yeah.
Willy and then Colette. She's not asking for sole authorship. And when he rejects that, then she goes, fine, she does her acting, and then in the end we learn she gets sole authorship rights to it. So if he just would have given her co-authorship, he would still have his name on those novels. But it's all or nothing for this guy.
Yeah. And I do want to say that it's, going off of what you were saying, Jared, about the fact that it's something that she enjoys being on the stage more. It's really rather heartbreaking when you hear her describe writing to her mother and about how she doesn't get any enjoyment from it. She talks about the long hours and Willy standing over her. And for this person who is regarded as, the biggest author in French history and all that, it's really heartbreaking to hear her talk about finding that little joy in the actual writing itself. And I think she can't yet contemplate writing free of Willy and what joy that might bring. So, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, writing is impossibly hard even at the best of times. So I'm not surprised that she would, find it painful, especially if she was being forced to do it. Because, when she ultimately puts out her best work, it's when she is, she's channeling that emotion. But the emotion she's channeling, at least for the second and third books, not necessarily the first, because that one she's more, it's coming from her more natural, just optimism. But the emotions she's channeling are pain and anger, and the dark side are they. But in this case, they're quite powerful, and they are like that ferocity that she is channeling into her work comes out, and it's her truth, so it's powerful, but it hurts. It hurts for her to have to give that much in that way, and it's kind of like her fingers are almost metaphorically bloody from all the time that she spends really pouring her own blood and sweat onto the page. So there's real consequences for that, and of course she doesn't want to write anymore, especially when she doesn't have to now, because it's just why would she would she subject herself to something that she has come to associate with this unpleasant experience in this time in her life. But one of the other writers in the book, not in the book, Schwab, one of the factory writers, she has a conversation with him earlier in the movie where she asks basically, why do you do it? And he says, essentially, because I have to. I suspect I'd go mad otherwise. And that's true for Colette as well. Even if she's not always writing, she has to find a form to express herself. And that expression, she finds an outlet for a time with her acting, but it comes when she does open herself to writing again, it's because she has to. She wants to, but also she has to because this is who she is. She is a creative person, and she has to find an outlet. Like her vibrancy is almost too strong to be contained, and she has to find a way to channel it, and she does, and she creates these beautiful works of art. And when she does, so it was now that it's not being associated with this pain that she has essentially been forced into doing it, she discovers the converse of that, the joy, like the kind of the freedom, the release of, rather than like, oh, I've been building all this stuff up inside me and it's crushing me and it hurts. It's like, I've been building all this stuff out inside of me and now I can let it out, and it feels like the greatest relief that she could imagine.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and pause here for a moment because we are an hour in. So I'm going to do the mid-roll. If anybody is watching this who came to our stream for the first time last week because of my interview with Mr. Doug Adams about the music of The Lord of the Rings, make sure you tune in for the next 3 weeks, especially because we are going to be covering all 3 of the Lord of the Rings films. Amy and I will be joined next week by Dan, voice of Geekdom, Carole Brown, and also the first time she's going to be on here, Cecilia from let me see if I get this right, Geeksterilia. Sorry, I might be butchering that. She was on the Here Be Dragons Coco stream, and we had a great time. So I'm very excited to have her on. So make sure you join us for that next week. And yeah.
And it will be at 5
yes,
p.m. Eastern.
Thank you for
right?
reminding me of that.
Yes.
All 3 of these.
Co-host, woo! Got a gold
All 3
star
of these
for
will
that.
be at 5 p.m. because we're going to be having guests who live in a completely different time zone. So we want to make sure that we're not keeping them up late all night. So all 3 of the Lord of the Rings streams will be at 5 p.m. instead of 7. So make sure you join us for that. Amy, I don't think you do anything else other than this channel, but if you,
this channel's all that's going on in my life. I was just yesterday. I was on a stream over at our new friend Yogi's channel, which is called Through the Moon Door. Moon Door is 2 words. And he just started a podcast about A Song of Ice and Fire, and I was on his 2nd ever episode, and I was his first guest. And we talked about Orientalism in A Song of Ice and Fire, and specifically in Daenerys Targaryen's storyline. And Daenerys is my favorite POV and favorite character, so we had a great time talking about that. And I've written and have an essay and have a video on Orientalism and his dark materials, so I had already done my research for that, so that was really fun to do. So yes, I just had that video out, so check out Through the Moon Door, 2 words. And if you go to my channel, which should be in the description, I have a little section called My Friends Channels, and you can just find it there. I have a couple things coming up for 2020, which we only have a month left. Once again, I have that co-authored essay with Lo the Lynx about Lysono Mar from A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm going to have them on my channel to talk about it. And I also then, after that, I have an essay about Cersei and her parallels with the last Empress of China, and I'm going to have Rohan on to talk about that. She is a very, very hard Cersei stan, and she's the only one in the fandom that I found that loves Cersei that much, and so I had to have her on my channel. And I actually just pretty much finished up my semi-final edits for that essay, so it is definitely coming at you soon. And in 2021, going to continue with The Song of Ice and Fire and his dark materials, but I'm going to start doing the Poppy War essays and also Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra content, which is basically the Avatar: Last Airbender is my favorite show in the whole wide world, so I'm very excited for that.
And Jared, you live a much busier life than either of us do, I'm sure, and you have much more on your plates. But do you have anything on the side you're doing that you want to plug?
No, not really. Like I said, I'm not much of a hashtag content creator. Not necessarily because I don't want to be, but just because I don't have the time right now. So I use my Twitter account to kind of vent my streams of consciousness, and then I will and then whenever I have the opportunity to join you five fine folks here, either in the Slack channel or on one of these streams, I always relish that opportunity as well. So the only thing I have to plug is my Twitter account at jkozel. I tweet mostly about Star Wars. My sports teams aren't doing very well right now, so mostly Star Wars, and then whatever other pop culture things come to mind. Politics too, but we're gonna dial that back down now that we've saved our republic.
Yeah, which I think we'll all be thankful to do. But yeah, I would just say anybody who's not following Jared on Twitter, you have to. I've said this before, but I don't think I've met a more like enthusiastic and positive voice, especially in Star Wars fandom, as well as Game of Thrones fandom. Which is not to say you're criticizing things. You're certainly not, but I think you're a voice for good in both of those fandoms, and dissuading people from maybe more toxic tendencies. So
John, I'm sorry, I forgot one more thing to plug.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I know people watching this like, God, Amy, shut up about plugging. But this one is very special to my heart, guys, because it is a new series I'm doing with Nessie over at the Unspun Yarn. Please search the Unspun Yarn on YouTube and give her a subscription. Turn on that awesome notifications so that you can see when we're streaming on December 2nd. We are starting, thank you, John. We are starting a new series called Bleep the Patriarchy. And we are going to drink and do some feminist analysis. And the first episode, we're going to have Jolie, a.k.a. All Hail the Knights Queen, on. We're going to talk about our first ever female and mixed-race vice president, vice president-elect, and also celebrating 100 years of women's suffrage. And it's going to be a pseudo-monthly series about feminist analysis, and our second episode is going to be about transphobia and turfism with Lo the Lynx, so we are extremely excited for that. So please, Nessie deserves your sub so much. And also, John, I do want to remind you to plug Here Be Dragons tomorrow. I'm sure you've already thought about it.
Yeah, everybody. I'm popping the wrong thing up. No, please join us. Join me, Stephen Stark, and Nessie the Questing Beast tomorrow on Here Be Dragons at 6 p.m. Eastern. We are going to be talking about what has aired so far of season 2 of The Mandalorian, and I could not be more excited for that because I have been loving this season. I had some reservations last year, even though I quite enjoyed it. But this year has been a lot of fun and a lot of reasons to be excited as a fan.
Oh, look, it's character.
It's a character.
Where have we seen her recently?
I don't know. But yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. And what's funny is I've already identified a point of contention that Stephen and I are going to have. About something that happened in the last episode. So as always, like Stephen and I agree on like big picture things, but we often have like disagreements if you dig down deeper. And so I'm always excited for that because the more bickering between the two of us, the better. And I see that we have been joined by through the moon door. You just missed, plugging for your channel. So
you are in good company if this is your quest.
Yeah,
to pay homage.
So I think we've gone through the mid-roll. So let's dive back in. Something that's really great about this film is that they actually made an effort at casting diversity and representation on screen. You have characters like Weber, who is played by an actor with a different nationality than he would have been, in real life. You also have, because he's a smaller character. I don't exactly know his name, but the guy who works for Willy, who Willy has asked him to burn the manuscripts at the end. Yes, and he doesn't. He's played by a black actor, which that's not historically accurate, but I like that they varied up the casting for the film. I think it, it shows that, it's sort of similar to what I felt was very commendable about the film Mary, Queen of Scots, where you kind of, if you consider that a film is fiction anyway, you don't necessarily need to say, oh, that's not true to history. These are all exercises in theatrics, basically. So I applaud more diverse casting, and I especially want to highlight the hiring of 2 trans actors to play in the film. There's a scene between them and Keira where that's the moment where Willy comes in and he's sort of jealous of the attention that she's getting. And I liked that in a film that is about, we're talking about, Missy, who is a trans man. And although that she would not have been identified as such at the time because that term didn't exist, but by our modern conceptions, she lives as a man. She is a trans man. And I like the fact that they took this effort with the casting.
And there's a comment from Guilty Undertaker maybe we could put up saying that, yeah, we totally recognize that there were people of color in France at the time. We're not saying that is not historically accurate. It's that the character he was playing was not a person.
Yes,
so I want to make that very
I
clear.
apologize if I miscommunicated that. That's what I meant, that the character himself was in fact a white man. So that's the point I'm making. But I go ahead, Jerry.
No, and just the one of the things that's so good about those kind of type of castings is they're not drawing attention to them. Essentially, like, the Heian, played by an actor of African descent, that's not a plot point in the movie. The fact that the 2 trans actors who are in the scene you just described, their names Jake Graff and Rebecca Root, they are playing. They're not playing trans characters in the story. They are trans themselves in real life, but in the story, they are just playing essentially another playwright and his wife. Yes. And obviously that kind of helps to build, it helps to accentuate the themes of the movie, and the fact that there is a trans character in the movie, Missy, a trans man who is played in this case by a cis hetero white actress, but I mean, she does a great job with the role. But since they cast that actor for that role, it was nice that they gave opportunities to others to play, and not necessarily to draw attention to it in a way, just letting them be what they want to be, which is actors.
Yes. And I'm trying to think of things that we haven't spoken about yet because we've jumped all over the film. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no. So I was just going to say we could kind of take this segue and talk a little bit more about Missy specifically, because we kind of draw because she kind of enters the movie at an interesting point. This is at the height of the success for the Claudine novels and for Colette and Willy professionally. And Missy kind of comes in, and she could be considered this very disruptive force, although she isn't, in the sense that she doesn't necessarily blow anything up. Willy actually kind of accepts her in a way that he would not accept a male lover of Colette's. But I believe Amy mentioned this during our last stream. The said words are masculine and feminine. There is no word for Missy, and Missy really kind of occupies a space that is similarly undefined because she refuses to allow herself to be defined. And that kind of is intriguing to Colette because she has, for better or worse, allowed herself to be, as she says in that conversation with Missy, on a leash. And perhaps, as Missy says, you even enjoy that a little bit. And I don't necessarily know how true that is, but I do think that it's something that Colette, as Colette says, she's in on the joke. And Missy but Missy, as Amy also pointed out, has lived the kind of the concealing life. She was, in fact, even married as a woman to a man, and they don't speak anymore because, as she says, what would that say about him? Which, but now she has the opportunity to do this because, as she says, she has the means. And while that, is a kind of a sad commentary on the state of the world at the time, it's also, it's encouraging to see her actually using that power. And it's something that Colette ultimately, she finds attractive, as she is attracted to Missy, and she learns that lesson from her in a way. And because Missy helps draw out that side of her, she kind of tries to draw out a side of him as well, that a more creative side, even though that's not really his natural state. He's not very comfortable on stage, but he does it for her because he loves her. And it's something that they can share in a way that they can't necessarily share everything that they might otherwise want to.
Yeah, and I have a lot of thoughts, obviously. First of all, if Missy were born today, they could just be non-binary if they'd like and use the term they and them. But that wasn't an option in the early 1900s. So we noticed this scene with Colette talking to Willy, and Willy kept saying, well, what is she, blah, 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 what is she, blah, blah. And then Colette answers, he, blah, 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 he, blah, 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 right? Colette, insists on calling Missy he. Whereas no other people recognize, perhaps, and we don't get really a scene where Missy says, I prefer that, but because Colette says that, I think that it's possible that Missy is a fully trans character. But I think it was Guilty Undertaker was saying this in the chat, the historical Missy lived like a man, but was kind of just a gender non-conforming woman. It's not quite clear how, if they would have identified as trans. And so I think the best thing we can say is that they are a liminal character, right? They are beyond the bounds of, they are living, outside of the man or woman binary. And because of that, we keep wanting to define Missy by using he or she, or saying they're trans, or saying they're just a woman in men's clothing, right? But that alone is falling into a trap of the binary and falling into a trap of heteronormativity. And what's interesting is that Missy has this line where, and I'm going to use he and him just because that's what Colette used. So there was a line from Missy where he said that he discovered himself, the first time he felt comfortable was when he wore his brother's school uniform. So it was when he was wearing pants and wearing kind of these male presenting clothes that he felt comfortable. And, I also have to recognize that clothes are not inherently masculine or feminine. It's only what we put on them as, oh, this is what a man would wear. This is what a woman would wear, right? But it's also interesting that I now can wear pants, but I don't know if John, Jared, maybe you guys on the weekends like to wear dresses or skirts. Maybe I haven't seen it, but you would be berated for that, and yet I can now wear pants, and that's okay. So kind of what is okay keeps shifting throughout history, and I think that Missy is an example of, a trans or a non-conforming, non-binary person where they kind of have to go through life negotiating their own identity. And Missy is a really good example of someone who knows who they are, but also is struggling to present themselves as they want to be seen to other people. And we also need to recognize that Missy is well off. If they were not well off, they couldn't even be having these conversations or trying to do this. They would have just been stoned in the streets. Poor people just can't be liminal people. non-binary, non-conforming people. It's really only the upper class that gets to play with gender, as they would say, right? So, for example, an example from Chinese history, emperors and empresses were able to sleep with opposite sex or with eunuchs or whatever they wanted to do, and no one would bat an eye. But then you could be executed as a peasant for the same thing. So I think that also Missy has some privilege in that he can ask these larger questions about the binary, whereas people, more common people would not be able to.
Mm-hmm. And to Missy's credit, he recognizes that.
Yeah. And he flat out says it's easier for me than a person of no means. So, so as you say, Jared, at least he's able to recognize that is a thing that he's in a fortunate position to be able to do. But going back, I did want to talk about an interesting point when Colette and Willy are having that conversation about, when she stresses, they're talking about Colette doing the pantomime and going on stage. And Willy says, does Missy share your aspirations? And Colette says, no, he hates it. He wouldn't be caught dead doing it. But then in that moment, she flicks her eyes up towards him and they have a shared moment. And once again, it's that business arrangement. Both of them are understanding what he's talking about in that moment. And so she's like, that would be a good idea. And so once again, showcasing that their relationship works best when it's about business decisions.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe one scene that we can talk about, there are multiple scenes between Colette and Missy that are interesting, such as when Missy tells Colette, I love you, and she goes, thank you. And then later in the movie, we have, they're on the train and Colette mouths, I love you to Missy. And that is just, I don't know about you guys, but that really touches me
I love
deep
that
down. I love that scene. But I think one of the most public scenes of their affections for each other is the Egypt scene, where you have, it's also a very thirsty scene for me, where you have Colette in this very skimpy outfit dancing, and Missy is playing this male explorer who has discovered this this mummy, and it turns out to be this beautiful woman who dances, and there are people in the crowd, kind of booing and such because it's how dare a woman dress up as a man, right? They're not okay with Missy. And then the climax of this is when they spin and spin and spin, and then they kiss. And oh my gosh, everyone's throwing stuff, going, oh, this is wrong, you guys are wrong, you're going to hell, right? Like, I'm sure some people watching this that are queer have had a similar experience where you're kind of berated and seen and your very existence is devalued and dismissed. And you can tell that they're really performing for themselves more than the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the people who are throwing things are actually specified to be like friends of Missy's former husband. So they clearly came with a hateful agenda, and they kind of ruined things. But Colette, she has a kind of scene afterward where she refuses to allow herself to be, where Missy is kind of, he's a little chastened by what just happened, but Colette's like, no, this only increases my resolve.
Yeah, and you were breaking up a bit there, Jared, but you were saying that there were people there that were specifically wanting to start something because of Missy's husband, is that correct?
Because they were friends of Missy's husband. The people who start throwing things and heckling are specifically specified to be associates of Missy's former husband.
Yeah, which, yeah, you see them there and you already know it's going to be trouble. And I'd like to point out that scene actually is based on a real event that did happen. And so it wasn't just done for dramatic purposes, but But I do love the following moment when Colette is asked by a reporter, what are your impressions after tonight? And she's like, my impressions, I'm disgusted. The people who threw those things are cowards. And she says, I will continue to pursue this because I want to. And that's exactly what she does. She goes on to perform on stage wherever she's able to. She goes traveling, and she's not going to let that stand in the way of her doing the thing that actually makes her happy.
Yeah, and it was a very transgressive thing to do at the time. Now luckily we have things like RuPaul's Drag Race and these kinds of things that celebrate liminality and transness and queerness and non-binariness. But at the time, it was unheard of unless you were doing a comedy where you were a man in a dress. Ha ha ha, that's funny. Unless you were doing comedic things, it was unheard of that you would do this. Not to mention, they were at the Moulin Rouge, right? This very well-known French venue for high art, and also a little bit of racy art that kind of pushes it a little bit. But they went too far, according to early 1900s sensibilities, basically.
Which is so funny to just in terms of sort of as a cinema geek, watching that was too far for the Moulin Rouge, and you look at how relatively small the Moulin Rouge actually looked versus I think we're all super familiar with the Baz Luhrmann film now, so we have these wild ideas of what the Moulin Rouge was like. It's like, really, that's too much. But that does really push us into the latter part of the film where things start to break down because the finances are starting to go down, because that show ends up being a disaster for Willy because he puts all of his money into that. And Colette's whole thing is she's not as necessarily concerned as maybe she should be about what Willy might do. So despite protests from her mother who says, you should have somebody look at his finances and you need to divorce him, and she's just kind of pushing it off and wants to go off and do her thing for a while. Unfortunately, Willy does the colossally stupid thing of deciding to sell the rights to the Claudine books to the publisher, and it's just like you watch him do it in that scene and you're just like, you son of a bitch.
Right? And this is, like I said, that when I talked about earlier, that Oscar-worthy clip where she comes in and she gives him a piece of her mind. And I have some quotes here, and this is not exactly each sentence. There are some sentences in between, but I was like scribbling down as quickly as I could because I was watching it with someone else, so I didn't want to pause it all the time. But what I really like about that is that she goes, these books were our children, right? She actually says that. And she goes, you hurt, and you hurt, and you hurt, and you say you are a man, and that clears it all away. These books were all we had. Don't tell me what Claudine was. I'm the real Claudine. When I think of the hours I spent trying to please you, I am ashamed. You molded me to your desires, thinking I wouldn't get 3. Well, Claudine is dead. I have outgrown her. Also, cheers to the effing patriarchy for he's exactly right. Oh, well, I'm a man, so it clears it all away. We are the weakest sex. Sorry, if we ever do put this into podcast form, I apologize to anyone listening to this because I just basically did a throw up noise into the mic.
That really is one of the greatest, tell the man off scenes in all of cinema. And again, it goes back to me saying, how was she not nominated for an Oscar for this performance? Because you take out the whole rest of the movie and just, show that scene, and it's utterly breathtaking. I just... I don't understand how that happened, but she is utterly phenomenal in this moment, and it's the culmination of this entire film where you're just waiting for this to finally happen, for her to unleash on him. And Amy, we talked about this when we did the Duchess last time. These two films actually kind of fit really well together in a weird kind of way, because all the frustration of the way that the Duchess ends, how she's sort of limited by her time and her circumstances, we kind of get the inverse with Colette, where she's able
Absolutely.
to achieve the freedom that she deserves. And so,
and I would say with Anna Karenina, it's a little bit in the middle. And Jared, I hope we can have you back for our Anna stream, because you get a little bit in the middle of that, where she's kind of free, but not really. I don't want to spoil it for you guys. But yeah, this is why Duchess is my first favorite, and then Colette is my second favorite, because I love the Duchess in that it is more realistic for what happened, but Colette really just, hits me like in that feminist hole that I have in my heart. It just satisfies it. It fills it, right? Because she does get away, and we get at the end, when we get those title cards, we find out that after, they did separate and she never had to talk to Willy again. It's like, yes! That's exactly what you want. Whereas with the Duchess, which everyone, please watch that stream that John and I did. That was a great conversation. That was really good. We had a lot of great things to talk about. But one of the things that I talked about in the Duchess stream was that I did appreciate that it was realistic that women do have to negotiate with the patriarchy, such that you often have to give up a lot. But with Colette, she was giving up a lot, but in the end, she took it all back, right? She took her name back. She took her identity back. And like Jared said, she was unfolding throughout the movie, right? She was forced back into her shell, and she just popped out like a daisy, right? And she did it fabulously. And that's why I really love Colette. And what I love more than anything, the reason I like the Duchess and Colette, is that they're both true stories. They're the stories of women and how they've had to deal with it. And I also appreciate, we're not quite sure what Colette's sexuality is. Is she bisexual? Is she lesbian? I'm not sure. Because she did seem to enjoy being with Willy in the beginning, but that could have just been that she was told that a woman is with a man. Perhaps she is a lesbian. I really don't know what that is, but I did kind of like that. Then she ended up getting with Missy, who is kind of trans, liminal, non-binary. So she seems, in my opinion, and this is obviously, maybe I just want her to be on my team, but I do see her as bisexual, because bisexual people can be attracted to men, women, trans people, non-binaries. It depends on the person, right? You fall in love with the person. And so I think that's really what's beautiful about Colette, is that she sees beyond skin deep, and she sees the person and their soul inside of them. And I think that's really what really attracts me to this movie, is that Colette is not only talented and sassy, but she's also very loving to the people who deserve it.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong about this, I actually think that she was married a couple times. So it's possible that I think maybe that happened in later years. So I would say that probably hints towards her being bisexual, and I would think. But in terms of the movie, it is, you could argue that it's ambiguous. Yeah, and Jenna says that she did remarry.
I love you, Jenna. Sorry, I had to say it.
But yeah, it's funny. You stole my thunder, Amy. You read that whole speech, and
I'm sorry, but I had to perform it, John, not you, for I am the woman on this stream.
Yeah, that would really just take the cake, wasn't it? It's like, we got two guys on the stream, and one of them had to take the woman's big speech at the end.
Well, that's why I'm glad you made me your co-host, John. Is like, you are guaranteed a woman's view at every single stream.
Yeah, if you just want the two guys, go watch the Pride and Prejudice stream. That's we went ham on that one, because we had no one to check ourselves there. But yeah, one of the other things I really love about that scene with Colette taking down Willy is when you think of an Oscar or scene, you tend to think of big speeches, yes, but also like big arguments. Like it's an opportunity for two actors to kind of really go at one another. And the thing about this one is that while I think Dominic West actually does a phenomenal performance in that scene, he doesn't push back against her at all because he has essentially crumbled at this point. His job right there is essentially to cower before her, and cower he does, and he does it quite well. But he has no ground to stand on in that scene, so it is entirely Colette's show. And that just really goes to it, rather than like giving her a sparring partner, it really gives her it makes him a set of bowling pins that she can just knock over on her way to, throwing that perfect strike.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, especially considering that his whole MO is that he's trying to basically dominate her and exert control over her. But in that scene, as you say, he crumbles. He has nothing. So it's to her to just lay everything out and completely obliterate him, and it's just so much fun to watch. But it's but I don't want to undersell also, as you say, how Dominic West actually is very good in that scene. The way he just seems kind of lost in responses, which again goes to this character's sort of lack of self-awareness, and when she says, you killed our child, Willy. Those books were all we had. Now there's no chance of repair. And he's like, we can make some more. And it's like, dude, you don't get it. It's just so good.
I think also the chat is having a great conversation about her sexuality, and that, a lot of it is lost to history, and we have to also recognize that queer history and people's sexuality is often just lost because it's considered shameful according to a heteronormative society that we live in and have lived in for thousands of years. So that, the thing about heteronormativity is it's considered quote unquote normal. So because of that, that is the default, and anything beyond that is, queer, which used to be a bad word, and now we kind of, champion. But because of that, a lot of what we want to know about Colette and what we wonder about Colette is really lost to us. And we want to celebrate her as a queer feminist icon, but also recognize that we can't fully make conclusions about her sexuality because we don't have the information. But we can say for sure that she was with women, men, and trans men. So, to me, I want to say that's bisexual, but that is my opinion, and I don't have this document I can throw in your face to back it up, because it's just it is lost to history. And to make it out like we're so much better today, Harry Styles for I believe it was Vanity Fair. I'm sure I might be getting the magazine wrong. There were pictures of him in dresses, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're against masculinity. The feminization of men today is awful," and blah blah blah. Everyone's freaking out about, or mostly conservative people are freaking out about that. The people are still berated for being liminal characters, for being non-binary, trans, whatever it is, and what are certain people's sexuality today might also be lost to history in the future. And that is a tragedy, because we should be documenting and celebrating people's sexuality that is beyond heteronormativity.
Well said.
But thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Amy, if you had a TED Talk, it would be packed. So...
I'd be like Oprah, but I would be like, and you get a glass of wine, and you get a glass of wine, and okay, you get some orange juice because you don't drink, and you get some water. Like, everyone could have a drink and be ready to go for the patriarchy drinking game during my TED Talk.
I'll have a glass of wine at your TED Talk, Amy. Thank
you, Jared.
So yeah, and then she leaves, and what we get after that is a series of, well, we after that we do get that scene of Willy going through the manuscripts, and I did want to point out that, because as you said, he says, there's my note, and what he actually says on the other, he flips the page, he doesn't point to a spot on the page and say, and that's my note. What he says is, he points out on that first page, that's my note, flips the page and says, that was mine, that was mine. He's not even attempting to point anything out. So it's, and he's like, it was a collaboration, and these prove it. Do me a favor, would you burn these? It's like,
if it proves it, then why do you want them burned, asshole? Like, come on.
And honestly, that's one of the little underappreciated grace notes of that scene that I really love, is that at the end, when he's finally like, okay, burn these, he can't even do that himself. He hands it off to Heian to do it for him, a mistake which comes back to colossally bite him in the ass, because Heian, of course, can't destroy them. He refuses to. He instead gives them back to Colette, and that's what she ultimately uses to prove her readership. So even if he had just at the very end been like, it was a collaboration, but now it's over, and physically toss them in the fire, he might be remembered very differently today. But he couldn't even do that.
He can't even stay there to watch it happen. Yeah. He has to leave. So it's like, you're just inviting this guy to make up his own mind about this, Willy. It's like, do this thing that is crucial to my continued financial success and all that, but I'm going to leave the room, but I trust that you're going to do the thing that I told you to do.
Honestly, Willy isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Like, he married a brilliant woman because he was not that smart. And we were talking about possibility of past talent. I'm going to go ahead and die on this hill that I don't think he was ever talented. And that he was just sucking off of other people's talent, and that's how he made the name Willy happen. And he was a good, hype man. And as someone who, you heard me during the mid-roll, boy, can I plug things. I get that, hyping things. And that is a valuable thing to advertise and to be like a PR person. But in the end, the substance of what you are selling is more important. And I would argue that, So a good book, even if it's not sold well as far as, hey, buy this book, if you actually read the book and it's a good book, that, I think, is more valuable than the actual how much the book sold. I mean, I'm going to riff on... I read all the Twilight books, but I'm just saying, those books sold well. That doesn't mean it's high literature. 50 Shades of Grey sold well. Doesn't mean it's high literature, right? So, but it could also go the other way, because I don't think that Catcher in the Rye is very good.
Hold your emails, 50 Shades for me.
Yeah.
Please. Send your emails to John at John Webster Film. Don't at me on Twitter. I will block you. But anyway, this is all to say that what's interesting about Willy kind of leaving it to someone else is that I think he felt a little bit of guilt, and that he may have thought that, doing it himself, that was such a final decision, and to just kind of pass it off to someone, he might have kind of washed his hands of it, right? And he's always seeming to want to put the blame on someone else, right? So when he sells the right to Claudine, he says, it's because I didn't want to sell the country home that I bought for you, that you liked, Colette.
Yeah, so
right?
This is actually your fault.
Yes, exactly. So I think it was his way of diverting blame, so that if Colette came stomping into his office, how could you burn those? Well, it was my assistant over here. You know what I'm saying? So I think it was also an example of Willy's his urge and his kind of impulse to blame other people.
Yeah. And I do want to move back a couple scenes just to point out what I find particularly reprehensible about Willy's actions, especially throughout this finale portion, is he's sold the rights to the books, and then he goes back to Colette, and there's that scene where they're like, packing up or whatever at the house, and and I think they're even in bed together at one point, and he doesn't say a single damn word. So he's just fully intending to just keep this from her for as long as possible, and it's just like,
yeah.
I just want to smack the shit out of him.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, he doesn't even get a good deal on the Claudine.
Wasn't it 5,000 francs?
Yeah, it's 5,000.
Am I correct?
Yeah, and like Ollendorf later spills the beans. He's like, I wish I could have given them a better sum, but one can only pay what I can afford, which basically means that he went in there, and Ollendorf made him an offer that was not very good, and he took it, either because he was that desperate or he was that spiteful. And that was immediately preceded by the scene where, after Colette says she's not going to write any more Claudine books, you see Willy like sitting at the typewriter trying to write one for himself, and he's basically like, Claudine in Paris. I give up. And it's quite funny, but then it also, it's part of that thing where he really is kind of crumbling, and he crumbles in almost every way, because while he doesn't tell Colette that he actually, that he sold the books, he does go to her and ask, can I sleep with you? And she lets him. Like, she actually is showing compassion to him for him there, and she's like holding him there. And what does he do in that moment? He's like, I don't sleep with Meg anymore because I can't. And she's like, oh, it doesn't matter. And he's like, it does. And you're just like, he just really doesn't have anything left at this point. And the House of Cards has completely crumbled. But like he says in the beginning, it's not, pretension, it's exaggeration, it's all pomp and show. He puts on the facade of the great man until the very end, until Colette comes in, and she huffs and she puffs and she blows that house right down. And it's pretty easy to do because there's nothing left there.
And I'm sorry, this was probably obvious. Is that because he got too old and he can't get it up? I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
I mean, that's a gradual thing throughout.
I'm sure those in the chat really appreciate me clearing that up.
I mean, that's a gradual thing throughout the film as he has more and more difficulty, which is why, like, he has her, dress up as Claudine, and why he needs to have, affairs with, other girls dressing up as Claudine.
Once again, for those of you like having this video in a tab or something and just listening, that's my response to that.
Yeah.
Gross.
I mean, yeah, the gross just, is there pretty much, really quickly, like when he has, the stage actress and Colette both like sit on his lap, and then he literally calls them the mother, the father, and the daughter, and it's like, what the hell, dude? It's just not right. We did kind of, there's one line in that final, blow up scene between him and Colette, which really is like the final nail in his coffin. Well, I mean, the coffin's already been buried, but this is like just one further thing, after she says goodbye, Willy, and he's like, Gabrielle, my dear, please don't go. And he's like, I forbid you. It's like,
dude, no, that's over. It's been over. And what's interesting is Willy recognizes his lack of power, like 50 scenes after he lost his power over Colette. Like, more than, not even halfway through the movie, she had almost started to cut ties with him, right? His control over her started waning. And then a little over halfway through the movie, when she gets with Missy specifically, she kind of is starting to either lengthen the leash or totally take off the collar, right? And so Willy is supposed to realize he doesn't have power, and he still says things like, "I forbid it," which, you know, wow, Willy.
Or you
wow.
still need your headmaster.
Oh God, which is just like, oh my God, so much like daddy vibes, which I'm just like, no, thank you, no, thank you, no. Yeah, and his like need to role play in bed and everything, which I'm not here to keep shame for anyone, but for him it was about power. It was about Claudette was someone he could. Claudine. Claudine is someone that he could control, someone that he could, a schoolgirl that he could impress, right? As this big man who publishes things, right? But Colette has outgrown that, and she is not Claudine anymore, right? She was the real Claudine, and that it was her experiences, but she's not that naive but sassy schoolgirl anymore who can be, because in the very first scene we get with them, she's kind of enamored by this man from Paris, right? He's from the big city. Ooh, you know, he has all this stuff going on for him. And in the end, she realizes he's just a pathetic butthole. And she was better than him the whole time. Just like Jared said, unfurling, right? She, the whole time, was the star of this couple. And it wasn't until she was able to claim authorship fully over this that she realized she didn't need him, and she never has.
Yeah. No, she really started to... I know I kind of said that she isn't unfurling, and I stand by that. There is one moment that I kind of forgot, but I actually don't know why I forgot it, because it's one of my favorite little scenes in the movie. It's when after she discovers Willy's first affair and she goes back home to her mother. There's that scene in the garden that they actually have that really like lovely little scene where her mother Sido, played by Fiona Shaw, asks like how she is accustomed to marriage. It's like, it's nothing like what I imagined, and she's almost like tearful and starts crying. She basically asks, did you ever feel like you were playing a part as a wife or a mother? And her response, sometimes as a wife, never as a mother. And then her mother is basically like offering her an out, and she says, I guess I just need to get used to marriage. And then the mother, kind of very shrewdly, as mothers do, says, better to make marriage get used to you. And so she does, even though it really is more of a business arrangement than a marriage. Like that's the point when she goes back to Willy and says, I want to be a part of things, don't lie to me. And from there on, she really does control the terms of their arrangement, such as it is. And it takes years before they both truly realize the extent to which that is true. But that's if there is a moment in their relationship when the power truly begins to shift, I think that's it.
Yeah, well, I mean, because, and he even comes to her, and she has all the power in that moment where he's like, are you happy here? And she says, yes. And he's like, did you miss me at all? And she says, no, not really. And so he's basically begging her to come back to Paris, and she's
yes, queen, take your power.
And she sets the terms in that moment. And so that really is it is the beginning of the shift. And that's why, as I said earlier, I question as to what she considers the nation, or the not the nation, what she considers their relationship to be, because I do think that's when she starts to, even though to be generous, I think in that moment she probably does still have romantic affection for him, but it becomes much more of that business transaction that it ultimately becomes. So,
and I think there is also a hint that he's about 10 years older than her. Did you guys get that sense?
Yeah, I think that they name the age at a certain point. I think he's 46 later in the movie. I think that she's meant to be like, so I think there's probably about a 10 to 15 year age gap somewhere.
So I also, because the reason I mentioned that is because there's that scene where he's talking about Meg, who he's having an affair with, dressing up like Colette, and goes, oh, she reminds me of you at that age, like 10 years ago. And he's about 40-ish at that time. She's, I would assume, then about 30-ish, because Meg is in her 20s. And she goes, nothing like me, right? And this is yet another example of Willy creating this idea of Colette in his head. a Colette who is strong and sassy, and yet when it comes to being with Willy, submissive. And that is not who Colette is. And she shows that every time. She shows that she is her own woman and that he can't control her. So he creates this Claudine in his head that he can control. And I think that's a really great example of this kind of fetishization of women. Like, it's, oh, I want a strong and sassy woman, but then when I want her to do something and, you know, in the bedroom or otherwise, she better do what I say, which goes against then the woman that you are creating in your head, right? So I think the age difference is also important, and that he always felt like he had some kind of power over her because he was older and therefore wiser and knew better, and she should just leave things up to him. When obviously the way he was handling the finances and, you know, selling the Claudine name rather than the summer home, you know, without asking her, these are not good financial decisions. And I think that Colette would have done a better job. So, but I think he used his age against her. And then when she was getting in her 30s, I think that was a real backhanded comment to say that Meg is like you 10 years ago. Like, dude, what an ass. I'm sorry. I just can't get over it. Like, okay, no doubt the Duke from the Duchess is terrible. But this guy, Willy, is almost just as terrible because he acts like he's slightly woke. You know what I'm saying? He's like, I'm okay with you not being fully straight, but then at the same time, I'm going to lock you in this room and make you right. Like,
well, because the reason why he's okay with it is because it turns him on. So,
right? Exactly, John. Exactly. So it's like Missy told, you know, Colette, it's a long leash, but it's a leash, right? He still wants to control her.
Well, the thing, and actually, it's funny that you mentioned the Duke because, you know, it's why I like sort of drawing the parallels between the two films, because Willy, and the difference with Willy is not so much, he's just as despicable, but he's more charismatic. Whereas the Duke is just like, he has no personality at all. And Willy has like the ultimate personality. He's super outgoing. He's a showman. He likes to make a spectacle. And he knows how to charm to get his way.
Yeah.
But in terms of on the level of being an actual human being, he's just as horrible.
Yeah.
Also, I have to say our favorite troll, Potter, he entered the chat a while back, and I love his comment about, can't recall, is there a term in sociology referring to men being in power? Nah, I can't think of one, Potter. I don't think that that's been invented, so, you know, I can't help you there, buddy. I'm sorry.
No, you'll have to come up with one, Amy.
I'll have to make one myself, yeah.
And then you can trademark it.
And then I can trademark it with bleep the in front of it, so.
And just to kind of, since we're talking about the you know, the word and the way that it's framed, the one of the parallels about with the Duke and with Willy, the Duke, unfortunately, I think that he is far more despicable than Willy, if for no other reason than he has no illusions from the start about what the relationship with Georgiana ultimately is. He views it as a business arrangement from the start, and she does not. And whereas Willy, as you say, at least there are the pretensions of a romantic relationship that he hangs on to for longer. And I do believe that at one point there was actually affection there, whereas on the Duke, you know, in addition to the horrible things that he does to Georgiana, he just never had any affection or regard for her at all. So it really, and that's unfortunately partly why if this movie for Colette is a triumph, that's kind of why the Duchess is ultimately a tragedy, because unfortunately the Duke does not break in the Duchess. He breaks Georgiana in a lot of ways. And she finds her own way to live, but that has to be a victory enough. Whereas in this one, Colette fully does break free. But I think what I'm really trying to say is, why can't all the men be Mr. Darcy for when they look like Keira Knightley? Like, why wouldn't you want to be Mr. Darcy for her? I don't know.
I'm not that as big of a fan of Mr. Darcy as you guys are, but you know what? I'll give you that. He's better than these other men we've been talking about.
What about Will Turner then?
I just got very parched. Don't get me started on Volterra. Take me now.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a preview of the Pirates of the Caribbean streams. That you can
We're
look
gonna
forward
have
to.
such a great time. Oh my god, Orlando Bloom gets me like in a special way. I don't even want to go there because then this is gonna turn into a thirst stream.
Well, especially because it's looking like we're going to get Lady Triple on for that, and if the diversions that the Nightmare Before Christmas stream took are any indication, they will
It's
be
gonna
off
just
the
be
hook.
me and Lady Triple just talking about things and drinking wine, and John, and if we get a male guest on that, are just gonna be sitting there being like, okay.
There was a moment during that stream where Steven tried to like say something. I saw him and I both like exchanged glances from like diagonally across the screen, and I was just like,
Just let him go. Just let him keep talking. Trust me, you don't want to get in the middle of Lady Triple and Amy Blackfire going at it. Just let him keep talking.
oh god. Well, there's our diversion.
Plug for the Nightmare Before Christmas stream. We do go off topic, but it's always for really interesting reasons. Okay?
And and that stream is a perfect demonstration of why, if we ever do get monetized, I will be doing some very aggressive editing in all of these streams. Yeah, so I don't know. Is there anything we didn't discuss about Colette? We're at the 2-hour mark, which I think this will be remarkable because we've had a habit of going way over on a lot of our streams, but we're doing pretty well.
Which is great for the content, but bad for my bladder. So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jared. Give us your final thoughts.
Yeah, so I would just say that for this movie, well, I said it's not my favorite Keira Knightley movie. That would be Pride and Prejudice. But this is a very underrated kind of gem, and it's unique in her filmography. Not only because this is, as far as I'm aware, the one time that she has played a queer character, but also one of the few times that she really has, like allowed her, like branched out in this specific way with material that is challenging for the best of actors. And I would argue, she is the best of actors. Hence why we have this little group dedicated to her. But I know that this may not be one of the ones that people are rank highest on her filmography. I would probably have it so like third or fourth behind Pride and Prejudice and Atonement, and then just because I have such affection for that first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, I think that was probably where I'd slot it. But really, this is a movie that if you ever go back and do a comprehensive deep dive on her filmography, it will be something that people can discover, and it will be something that I think people will have more appreciation for over time, as something that it's like, I know that when people think Keira Knightley, they think of Elizabeth Swann or Elizabeth Bennet or Cecilia Tallis, but in this case, I do believe that Colette will become one of the characters that she is most known for in the future, because and even if she doesn't, then hopefully just a few more people will come to understand and appreciate what a little gem of a movie this is. And in all its aspects, it is worth your time. I know a lot of people in our chat who have been kind enough to join us on the stream say that they haven't seen it. I would encourage you to give it a chance if I have the time. It's worth it. It's not too long. It's about an hour and 50 minutes, shorter than this stream actually. So I would say that if you are willing to open your heart to it, I believe you will find something worth that rewards you.
Yeah, and the person that I was sitting down with my notes. I was ready to watch, and I thought I was going to watch by myself. And my partner came in and was like, I'll watch the first 15 minutes, and he ended up watching the whole thing with me. So Colette is a great movie, and I encourage everyone to watch it. And it's not a full 2 hours, if I'm not mistaken. It went by really fast. It's a really good movie, and it's very succinct, and I think every scene leads up to something important. And I think that the fact that Willy is her husband is trying to it is kind of taking credit for her and kind of taking control over her. I think most women would really relate to in their lives, and hopefully not because you've dated someone that's like that, unlike me. But you always have these at least in my past, I have had a relationship like this where you are kind of negotiating their control over you and trying to find your way to show your talents and to shine in this relationship where someone is trying to overshadow you. And that's why I think that Colette is an interesting historical figure, and Keira Knightley's performance of her is obviously breathtaking. I mean, the range of acting and facial expressions and the way that her voice kind of breaks at certain points, she really, I think, makes the character come alive, who is an actual real person. So Colette kind of jumps out of the history book pages. And I think that this is an important story to tell, not only because of the themes of how patriarchy can control women's talent, but also how women can burst out of their shell and overcome the kind of control that men try to put on them. And they can, in the end, have their names in the history books. Colette is known because she did fight back, right? And, the first and only Empress of China, Empress Wu Zetian, we only know because she said, no, I'm not going to rule through my son or rule through my nephew. I'm going to declare myself Empress of China, right? Those are the women, unfortunately, that make the history books because the men hold them down so much that we never hear about them, or we hear them as the wife of so-and-so, right? But Colette isn't the wife of Willy. She is an author in her own right because she shined on her own. Cheers.
I'll drink to that, even though I'm all out of orange juice, but I still have water.
Oh my gosh, you're out of orange juice already? Gosh, John, you should have paced yourself.
I know.
You should just have the bottle of orange juice next to you, like I have the bottle of wine next to me.
But I drank so much so quickly. That's why I've gone so crazy this stream.
I can tell you're a little OJ drunk. So.
And brilliantly said, well-behaved women seldom make history. Yes.
Well said, Guilty Undertaker. Love it.
Yeah, I'm just, repeating what I've already said. This is a tremendous film, and I think it's one of Keira's best, and hopefully as time goes on, more people will discover it. I think it deserves it, and yeah, I just and sorry, Jared, I've just this second been distracted by seeing a Rise of Skywalker poster in the corner of your picture, and I'm like, of course you do.
I've got all 9. I don't know if you can't see them. Like that one over there, that's the Phantom Menace. It's unfortunately being grayed out, but I have all 9 Skywalker Saga theatrical posters, full size, up on the walls of my room because I'm on brand.
I love it. That's why I'm saying, folks, like if you want great Star Wars content, follow Jared on Twitter, because he loves every bit of everything Star Wars, and which is refreshing.
And he's a wonderful person, and you need to be his friend.
Yeah. Yeah,
and he is an actor that we have hired to pretend to be John's friend. Let's not forget that.
So respect the effort that I put into Jared's Twitter account.
No, John and Amy, as I joked before our stream started, John and Amy are both paying me to be here. They're paying me with their friendship because they are both wonderful people as well. And I feel very privileged to be invited onto our channel to discuss our group, the Knights of Keira, but you are the host. This is your channel. And I always feel just very grateful that I get to, discuss these movies with you, whether they star Keira Knightley or anything else. It's always a joy.
Well, we are blessed to have you here, Jared, and we're so glad that you came on. And once again, we're the Knights of Keira. You can follow us on Tumblr or on Twitter. We are all things Keira and how amazing she is. And we have also gotten a little bit of traction on Instagram as well. So check us out on Instagram.
Yeah, which I don't know if anybody from Instagram found their way over here, but hopefully you guys are at least watching the replay. If not, and and if you're watching this but not live, please join us live next time. Our stream is normally on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, although for the next couple weeks we will be at 5 o'clock for the Lord of the Rings. But we hope you guys join us live. It would be great to have you in the conversation in the chat, because the more Keira fans we can draw in, the better. Yeah, and Jared, though we do have a absolutely wonderful time, obviously, as the Knights of Keira, talking all these great movies. I promise I am also going to get you on at some point to talk about something else as well. I think we can have some great Star Wars conversations, or maybe even Game of Thrones conversations, maybe about a certain season.
I'll just shut up for that stream or not be on it and just take a day off, take a Saturday off, because I can't lie. So
that's fine.
It's just gonna be John and Jared. I'm gonna take that Saturday off, and I'm just gonna eat popcorn, do my nails, and watch something else, and not even be in the chat because I can't.
You don't need to lie, Amy. Just don't ask us to lie either. Honestly, that's like Colette says to Willy, like just. We're open and honest about our transactions here.
All right, what I'll do is if I'm on that stream, I will present counter evidence to your evidence, and it'll be like a debate. That'd be kind of fun. Or you guys can just gush about season 8, and I won't even be on the stream.
Yes, but what if I've been thinking about this. I'm gonna
have you?
I have. I'm going to try also, and this is the first she'll be hearing about it, but I'm going to try and get Shakes on as well, because she also is a season 8 fan. So you're going to have to go up against Shakes of Thrones too, Amy.
I think I'm just going to sit that one out, John, and take a Saturday off and give myself a day of treat yourself. So.
Okay, so I think we've wrapped up with Colette. I have one more picture, so I'm just going to throw this up. This is from the end of the film, when she's on stage, and it's the big climax of the film where she's reading from her new novel, which is published under her name. And which, by the way, I didn't mention. Amy said I would go on and on about it, and I didn't actually mention the music of the film, which is composed by a guy named, I'm going to butcher his name, so I apologize in advance, but I believe it's Tomas Ades. I know I've gotten that wrong, but he's actually not traditionally a film composer. He does like classical music, concert pieces, and I thought it was a brilliant decision to bring him in for this film, not just because as people who know me know that I had kind of rant against modern film scores that tend to be more electronics based and not as memorable, but here you bring in an actual, classical style composer to do the music for this film, and I think it's great. I think just the instrumentation is beautiful, and probably one part of the film that I want to single out is the Moulin Rouge sequence, and just the style of music that he composes for her stage performance and stuff like that. It's a very creative and beautiful score.
Yeah, and I would say when they're transitioning to the scene where Willy and Colette are sitting next to each other and they're seeing Missy and Meg kind of hanging out, the violins on that, I'm a violinist, have you heard? So I'm a little obsessed with the orchestral part of the score, and it's definitely, you can consider it a classical score, which I think is great for this kind of early 1900s period piece. And so I think that the music killed it in this film, and I'm so sad that we didn't mention it because we were talking so much about the characters and the themes and all of that. But the score absolutely deserves a huge shout out.
And I will say that because I don't want people to think that I, am underplaying the score just because we didn't make that much time to talk about it. But it's become a trend nowadays that it's very difficult for smaller films to get their film scores released. And especially as we've talked about, this was not a movie that got a lot of traction. So they actually waited several months, I think, before they even released the soundtrack digitally, to say nothing of when it was finally released on CD. And you guys know I own the CD. Physical media.
Physical media, John? No, that doesn't sound like you at all.
But it's just like a score done by a classical composer who, created this absolutely beautiful score recorded with real instruments and all that. And the fact that it was so hard to finally get a decent release for it, it kind of speaks to the shape that, not just the film score industry is in, but also just soundtracks and, again, physical media. But I am glad that it did get a release. So if any of you guys watching this like the music, it is available. If you can't find it on CD anymore, it'll at least be on iTunes. So definitely look for it there. And I will say to the composer himself, and Thomas Edes, even though I've just butchered your name, if you're watching this, because I did at you, so I assume you're watching.
He's totally watching. He's a fan of Gough. What are you talking about? He's totally watching this.
Come on the channel. I just did a whole stream about music last week. So come on. I will do a whole Colette musical score stream, just talking to you about the music. So so this is my invitation. But yeah, it's great music, and yeah, it's fitting that I'd close out on a extended promotion for the music, because that's my brand. But yeah, so let's go ahead and talk once again about what's coming up in the future. First, I'm going to make sure I don't forget this time. Tomorrow on Here Be Dragons, tune in, Stephen, Nessie, and I believe we'll have a guest or two. If Stephen was here, he could remind me, because
And that's at 6 p.m. Eastern, correct?
I don't remember. Yeah, that's at 6 o'clock Eastern. We're going to be talking season 2 of The Mandalorian. So that's going to be a whole bunch of fun. Then next week on this channel at 5 o'clock, we're moving to 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern, just for Lord of the Rings, not for the future, but for the next 3 weeks. We're going to be talking next week about the Fellowship of the Ring. We're going to have Dan, voice of Geekdom, Carole Brown, and why am I forgetting Cecilia? Sorry. We have multiple guests over the next couple of weeks, so I'm trying to keep them straight. Cecilia from Geeksterilia, and that's going to be a load of fun. So please come along for next week. Amy, real quick, go through the stuff you got coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of stuff going up on my channel, so I'm just going to say sub to my channel, follow me on Twitter. The links are in the description. But I will say once again, Bleep the Patriarchy, December 2nd. Please come on the Unspun Yarn, Nessie's channel. And we're going to have some great feminist analysis coming. She deserves your subscription. You have no idea the amazing videos that she has. So I just wanted to plug that. And I also wanted to thank Jared, our fellow Knight of Keira, for coming on. Thank you, bro. We are so excited that we had you here.
And I do want to say, sorry, Jared, I'll let you talk first.
No, all I said was that it was my honor and my privilege as always.
Thank you, man. We appreciate it. And I do want to take the time to echo the recommendation. Please go ahead and subscribe to Nessie's channel, The Unspun Yarn. Aside from the fact that she has amazing content and the fact that she's got a new series starting with my co-host, Amy Blackfire, she is, I mean this genuinely, she's my sister. just as Stephen is my brother. So if you like anything that I've done, I owe it to both of them. And so please follow Nessie's channel and follow her on Twitter and everything. She deserves all the love and respect in the world. So please go ahead and do that. And yeah, and so I guess that's it. And Jared, as you said, you don't have any content and stuff, but please, I'm going to say once again, follow this man on Twitter. You will not regret it.
At J-Code.
And Nessie just showed up in the chat. We love you, Nessie.
Oh, love you too. And yeah, this is the part where I get mushier than I intended to. But I just will say again, like, I would not have accomplished what I have accomplished without Stephen and Nessie in particular. So please go ahead and support them in any way you can. Okay, so the next Night of Keira stream will be, I think we're tentatively set for January, and we'll be doing A Dangerous Method, which I feel is one of Keira's more underrated performances. And Jared, we're going to be trying to talk you into doing that one too. We won't commit you to it while we're live on the air, but
I'll see what I can do.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so definitely keep your eye open for. We'll announce that at a certain point in the future, but we're going to be focusing on nonstop Lord of the Rings for the next 3 weeks. So get ready for that. And yeah, so now I'm just rambling. So unless you guys have anything else to say, I think we'll go ahead and sign off.
Nope, just the road goes ever on. So
yeah,
right on into next week.
Yeah.
Also, Keira Knightley is bae, and she is our queen. Just to remind you guys.
Yeah, we like held back on the thirst.
We really did. I think we did a really good job this time, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say Keira Knightley is very pretty, and I like her very much. So, and that's all the thirst stream will.
She's also hella sexy.
If you want more, email we3dragons@gmail.com to sign up for the Slack, and you will get all your heart desires and more. Okay, and on that note, we'll finish up. Thank you all for coming. And
We Three Dragons is spelled out, just to say we and then THREE dragons@gmail.com. Just
as a matter of fact, I do have it right here. So there you go. If you want to join the Slack, go ahead and write that down. I'll leave it up for a second so you guys can get that. But thank you once again, Jared, for joining us, and Amy, as always. It's I just realized this was the first Night of Keira stream where you are officially you are officially my co-host. So
my co-lord commanders, I salute you.
All right, guys, I think I have kept this going for long enough. So have a wonderful night, and we will see you next week. Bye.